when you look at, I thought Miami's first trade was really good because I thought trading back, it said they're all in on Tua.
Right.
I like the fact that they got 2 1s and a 3 next year for him. That was good value. But I do think they overpaid to go back up.
To go back up, yeah.
Yeah.
It's interesting because it's both good news and bad news, right? The good news is they've acquired a lot of capital that gives them a ton of flexibility this year, next year, following year. I mean, they are approaching as close to an NBA model of accumulating value in the draft as anybody, right? Trying to have some assets going forward. But when you do that, the bad news is you tend to devalue some of those assets and give them up a little freely. And that kind of feels like what happened in the second trade, that you sort of undervalue that a little bit because you've got them stockpiled and that's what they're there for. I think in those cases, when in most of the cases, most of the times, Mike, you know this, you're overpaying a little bit when you're moving back up, but you do it for a reason typically, and that's where you have to have faith in how they see their board. If they really see that there's where there's that break in value, and that changes board to board and year to year, but sometimes you see your board breaks in a way where those blue players stop at a certain level and you're willing to overpay to get up there if that's where you see the value in the draft board, even if nobody else does.
Yeah, it seemed like this trade is kind of broken into like it's going to be quarterback, storyline, and then in my opinion, there's like 4 great skill players in terms of Devontae Smith, Jalen Waddle, Jamar Chase, and Kyle Pitts. Now, for me, like Smith would go to the back of that. Now, I'm at the national championship game, and he was the best player on the field that day, and we couldn't defend Marvin Harrison for 20 years, but he is a small guy. Like he is, I don't know, like if he's successful, I wouldn't be surprised, but boy, I just don't know if he could withstand the rigors of the NFL.
Well, and that's what, you bring up the point in Marvin Harrison, but how many of those can you point to, right? There aren't that many. And for that reason, they tend to break down for a whole variety of reasons. And that's where the risk is. But that goes right back to my earlier point of it depends. The beauty's in the eye of the beholder and how they put their draft board together. And if they see that break point, if they're gonna ding a guy like that on size, then that maybe he drops out of that group for them, and they don't see him as in that group before, and that puts a premium on the need to move back up into a spot they're more comfortable with.
I'm just curious, like how would you have handled? Again, I think we agree the first trade was definitely good value, but would you have just hit pause till draft day? And then knowing that you have a lot of extra ammo if you have to go back up?
Yeah, I think I would have. I think there's no, to go back down to do what you did. And I think you and I both agree that first trade was a really good one. I don't know what the rush was to move back up. There had to be a triggering event because there's no reason to move. Time is on the side of the person who has the assets, right? So the Dolphins had most of, they had the ability to move because they knew they had the assets. The only other thing it takes is a willing trading partner. And if, to your point, if they knew that the Eagles were going to move out, or if they were bluffed into thinking it, then that created the impetus to move, because all the assets in the world don't mean anything if you don't have a willing trading partner.
And then, Tom, what are your thoughts on San Francisco? Because to me, there's somebody that they're just lasered in. Now, I know some speculation out there, like maybe it's to hold on for Watson or another veteran quarterback, but assuming that's going to be a draft choice, I don't know, that seemed like that was a really big premium, and it must be someone they're very convicted on.
That's exactly right, Mike. But and that's the scary part of this, is you well know you can get convicted on somebody, tremendously convicted on somebody. I mean, I can tell you, we were pretty convicted on Joey Harrington back in the day. And that's the danger of getting convicted on somebody before you've seen him play a snap in the NFL, because you really don't know. As great as all of those quarterbacks seem to be, you still don't know when you make that transition and what you end up with when they're in the NFL with all the elements, right? How are they going to take to not just their teammates and not just the system, but how are they going to take to the coaches? How are they going to take to the demands? How are they going to take to the media market, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
How about this, guys? The last 5 players over 10 years that were traded up in the top 3 were Mitchell Trubisky, Jared Goff, Carson Wentz, Sam Darnold, and RG3.
Wow.
It's happened 5 times in 10 years, and those are the 5 players. It's 0 for 5. I mean, that is really, none of them are, well, Sam for another couple of days, but none of them are, stay with their same team. And
right.
it's a remarkable number. Like for me, I thought it was Mac Jones because Mac Jones to me, like when you look at Kyle and the success he had with Matt Ryan, I think that's the closest guy to Matt Ryan.
Right.
And I think Justin Fields is just too inconsistent for him. And then the other thing I was thinking about, and I was curious to get your thoughts, Tom, on this is like if and I was trying to think of the best analogy to say this, like if you were running a corporation and you were going to go all in on a product or an idea, but it was only based on like one rep. So like, if you're building a rocket ship and it goes up once, you're not going to put people on it. And I'm thinking like, how in the world can somebody trade up for Trey Lance? He's playing one game.
What I know that is, I don't think you can. To your point, you have to go to a. I think predictability becomes as important of a criteria as anything when you're moving up and paying that much to move up into that spot, which is a direct, a direct analogy or direct companion to your point earlier about Mac Jones, right? You can, like you said, I think the comparable Matt Ryan's a good one. You know the intelligence level. He's got predictable mechanics in a way. You're not overly relying on athleticism, which obviously can decline over time. So and it fits what he does out there. So if that in fact is what they're thinking, it makes a ton of sense. And it makes a ton of sense, not just based on the fit, but based on the characteristics of predictability that you see in a guy like Mac that might not be there for some of the other guys. And Justin Fields, I think, is a great case in point as well in terms of the unpredictability.
Yeah, I don't, Tom, I'm curious, like, I don't think there's any way that Jimmy Garoppolo is on this team. I know one thing they're saying, but to me, like, how can they keep Garoppolo knowing that they're going to have some quarterback there? And to me, it's a little bit different than Mahomes because Kansas City traded up to the 10th pick. They get one first-round pick. I don't know. I feel like this dynamic's different than that.
The only thing I can think of there, Mike, well, there's really two things. One is if you really do want to try and buy some time for the rookie, whoever it may be, assuming it's not Mac, to develop. But that, as you said, that's a double-edged sword a little bit because you're bringing conflict into the quarterback room from day one, and depending on what those dynamics are, you could be impeding growth instead of sort of protecting it, giving him room to grow. But the idea of going through that is to maximize the value on Garoppolo, right? His value isn't going to be as great today as it's going to be a year from now if he has even a decent year next year and is able to stay healthy and play through it. It goes back to the Alex Smith trade and try and gain some. And I know it's not apples and apples to what Kansas City had, but certainly that's more of the outcome that you'd be looking for.
Yeah. And what about Philly? Like, what are your thoughts on what they did?
I think it's interesting. Obviously, they, just as we were talking about with Miami, and not liking that move back up as much, you have to like Philly's move down. It'll be interesting to see what they've obviously got thoughts on what they can do in the middle of one versus up at 6. But I think it also tells you a little bit on what they think, of their current situation and the comfort level they have with it versus trying to stay up in 6. And as others were speculating, maybe even trying to make another move up higher.
Yeah. What's like to me though, I've been arguing with Orlovsky on this for weeks now. I like on Hurts, like Tom, like guys throwing 148 passes. Like
I know
the only thing you can say is you don't know. Like and all these other guys, oh, he's their guy. How do you know?
I don't think you can say that, but what you can say is there's enough of a chance that he's your guy that you're not willing to trade up and give up value to go get one of those guys, nor do you even want to sit there necessarily at 6 and take one if they're there in the event he is your guy. Right now and you may never find out, and then you've got an asset that is devalued before you even got a chance to maximize it. So I can understand it. It's a bit more of a crapshoot, but that's why I said it gives you insight into what they think of Hurts because they clearly think he's got a chance to be the guy. I agree with you. There's nothing you can point to say he is the guy, but if you've got enough confidence level in his potential development and confidence level in the staff to develop him, it may be worth taking a year to find out. You're going to add weapons in this year's draft anyway. Even picking at 12, you're still going to add a huge assets, and with what they picked up from Miami, they can build around it, and then go after the quarterback issue next year, knowing they're going to have a down year anyway, regardless of who's under center.
Right. Yeah. It just the only thing for me is like if I'm the owner, I'm doing that. If I'm the GM, I may not be doing that because when you survive that coaching transition, which we all know is really hard to do, Tom, like you got to show progress right away. And
I was just going to say, we both know that Howie and Jeff have a special relationship too. So I think that sometimes you can afford to be patient when you are in lockstep with your owner on that front. And that, again, making another assumption here, but you have to assume, given the history there, that there's been a bit of a mind meld in terms of making that decision organizationally.
Yeah. And you know what else is hard too is like you got Nick Sirianni, who I think has a chance to be a good coach, but he's trying to get himself established. No offseason program. Hurts is now going from, if you think about it, Alabama to Oklahoma to Peterson to Sirianni. Like it's going to take him a minute too. And I don't know. I just feel like that situation is going to take a while, but I love the fact that, if Wentz plays at 75%, they're going to sit there. They're going to have 3 ones.
Yeah, that's exactly right. They're going to have 3 ones, and they're still going to have a quarterback that they really like. I mean, I know we're saying that Hurts is still a wild card, but they drafted him last year for a reason. They liked him, and even though it's a switch even though he's got the history that you just described, and even the switch this year from Peterson, it still is. You can flip it around and say we're looking at it as adding another draft choice to the mix, and we've got to develop him just like we would have to develop anybody we took this year. So you add that to the mix, and you get locked in then organizationally to say to Nick, look, your job as you develop as a head coach is to develop these young guys, and we're going to all develop together. And organizationally, we have confidence in that. And obviously, Joe is here; he could attest to it. But they've had a great experience with that in the past, where they've done that and developed the organization. You look back to when Andy started there and was developing as a head coach. They developed coaches and players and the organization in lockstep, and you can see signs of them doing that again this time around.